Hello everyone, this is the third video of Chapter 3, Equations in y equals mx form. In this video, you can write and solve direct variation equations by using y equals mx or y is equal to y over x. Let's begin with what it means by a direct variation. A linear relationship is a direct variation when the ratio of y to x is a constant m. If you remember this m from the last video, this was representing the slope as well. This is the key point that you might want to mark. We say y varies directly with x. This is an important order that when you see a sentence where something varies directly with another one, then you can assume that the first vocab or first term that they say is representing the y. The second term after the word with will be representing the x value. In a symbol, you will write m is equal to y over x. If you remember from the last video as well, the m was the slope, where slope is rise over run. Or you can write y is equal to mx form, where m is the constant of variation. So sometimes they're going to say constant of variation that is very similar to what we call constant rate of change. I used to call it CRC. When you're looking at this graph, there is a big point that you have to know that any of the direct variation equations will have 0, 0. So let's look at the problem number 1. The amount of money Robin earns while babysitting varies directly with the time as shown in the graph. Determine the amount that Robin earns per hour. So as I mentioned earlier on the sentence, I see the word varies directly with. So let me write that down. In the previous slide, they were saying that y varies directly with x. The money Robin earns while babysitting is representing your y value, where varies directly with the time. The time will be representing the x value. Let's compare with the graph. On the graph, you see the x is also representing the times, as what we talked about on here, and the y is representing the amount earned in dollar sign. So in order to find the amount that she's earning per hour, this is what we call also unit rate from the previous grade level. Let's find how much she's earning per hour. By looking at 1 hour, it's kind of hard to see because it's not really at the corner of my graph, so I have to make an assumption. Some people might think this is 7, some people might think this is 8 or whatsoever. In order to do so, let me find the 2 points that's on the graph that's very clear. The first point that I see is at 2, I have 15. I can also find another point at 4. At 4 hours, I'm earning $30. And there's actually one more that at 0, if you don't work at all, then you make nothing. It's up to you how you want to pick the points, as long as it's very clear to read it. So for example, in this case, she's earning $15 for 2 hours. If I want to find how much she's earning per hour, then I can say for 1 hour, if I divide 2 to 2, I get 1. So do the same thing. 15 divided by 2, I'll get 7.5. That's 7.5, $7.50. So that's how I know that she's earning $7.50 per hour. Let's look at the other example. 2 minutes after a skydiver opens his parachute, he has descended 1,900 feet. After 5 minutes, he descended 4,750 feet. If the distance varies directly with the time, at what rate is the skydiver moving? So in this case, there are a few informations that you can pick. The first information is that 2 minutes after a skydiver opens his parachute, he's descended 1,900 feet. So in 2 minutes, there is 1,900. Also, there's one more. After 5 minutes, he descended 4,750 feet. Just to be careful that you do not mix up the orders of their corresponding numbers. So if the distance varies directly with the time, so if I know the distance is representing the y value, varies directly with the time, where time is the x value, what is the rate that skydiver is moving? In order to find this, again, that you can have many different ones, but to begin with, your m was represented by y over x. If I'm looking at these two coordinates, you need to know which number is representing the x and y. In this case, the y will be 1900 over the x becomes 2. This ratio should be same as this number where you have 4750 feet within 5 minutes. If I simplify this number, 1900 divided by 2, I will get 950. So he's descending 950 feet per minute. If I'm looking at this number as well, if I simplify this, I will still get 4750 divided by 5, I will still get 950, and the unit should be the same, feet per minute. So you'd realize that any number that you pick that should work as long as you're using the corresponding number for the other unit. Number 2, a cyclist can ride 3 miles in 0.25 hours. Assume that the distance biked in miles y varies directly with the time in hours x. This situation can be represented by y is equal to 12x. Graph the equation. How far can the cyclist ride per hour? I see two different questions. One, you need to graph of this equation. Two, how far is he riding per hour? So what I'm going to do is actually based on the information that's given to you, let's find out how far can he ride per hour. In this case, they told you that for 3 miles it takes 0.25 hours. I need to know which one is your x and which one is your y in order to find your direct variation, y over x. The hint is right here where it says something varies directly with. They're saying the y is represented by the miles. So that's how I can tell this 3 miles in here will be representing y, and the time in hours, that's representing the x in here. So the corresponding number, 0.25 hours, will be your x value. If I put it in here, the y becomes 3 and your x value becomes 0.25. If I'm using a calculator, 3 over 0.25 will become 12. And one thing that I realized, this 12, I've seen this number in this problem before. This 12, if you look over here, that they're saying they already gave you the equation y is equal to 12x. Going back to the definition of this direct variation, m can be found as y over x, but do you remember also y is equal to mx? In this equation where it's saying y is equal to something x, this 12 will be representing your m value as well. So in other words, you didn't have to do any of this if you already realize that m is written on your problem. If I want to graph this one, so I'm going to draw x, the horizontal line, and then the y. If I have this two relationship and x is representing the time and y is representing the miles, in 1 hour he can travel 12 miles. In 2 hours he can travel 24. What if I don't spend any time to ride, then I would go 0 miles, then I realize that I will have a straight line graph. Similarly, a grocery store sells 6 oranges for $2. Assume that the cost of the orange varies directly with the number of oranges. This situation can be represented by y is equal to 1/3 x. Graph the equation. What is the cost per orange? So first, let's identify what are the things I need to answer. The first one is to graph. The second one is I need to find how much it costs per orange. The information that's given to you, there are 6 oranges for $2. I again need to know which one's your x and which one's your y. That information is written right here, where it says something varies directly with. They're saying the cost of orange varies directly with the number of oranges. So that's how I can say the m is represented by y over x, where y is representing the cost of the orange. So in here, the cost part will be 2. I'm going to write $2 per, the x was representing the number of oranges. In here, I have 6 oranges. That makes, if I simplify this one more time, I will get 1/3. If you haven't seen it, this 1/3 is written on the y is equal to mx form, where this 1/3 is representing m right away. This means that when you are buying 3 oranges, I will pay $1. But that was not the question they were asking. They were actually asking you what is the cost per orange. So what if I want to make this as 1 orange? So if I'm buying 3 oranges for $1, then if I find the ratio, then if I divide this one by 3, I get 1. If I do the same thing, I will get 0.3 repeating. Only thing is, in real life, we don't really use repeating number, especially for the money. So we're going to say this costs 33 cents per orange. And that's one of my answers. So on the graph, based on the information that was given to you, the x was representing number of oranges, and the y was representing the cost. Let's see if I can write it backward. Cost of oranges. So in here, if you remember the very first information, for 6 oranges, it cost $2. So there is a point. And then I found out if I want to spend $1, I can get 3 oranges. So for 3 oranges, it cost $1. And then another one that we found. So at 1, I'm going to have about $0.33. So that would be around here. If you want to find another point, you can just keep doing this over and over. My other question was, what happens if I don't buy any oranges? The answer will be you would not pay anything then. So if you remember earlier, that me saying that the direct variation will always pass through 0, 0, the origin. And if I draw the line, we'll make a straight line graph. I normally draw an arrow on the other side so that way it's keep going. So far, you use tables, graphs, words, or equations to represent the proportional relationship. This time, we are going to compare with 2 different formats. Number 3, the distance y in miles covered by a rabbit in x hours can be represented by the equation y is equal to 35x. The distance covered by grizzly bear is shown on the graph. Which animal is faster? Explain. There are 2 quantities that we're trying to compare. The first one was the rabbit, and the second one is the grizzly bear. They were saying the rabbit can be represented by equation y is equal to 35x, where the bear could be represented from the graph. So here's what I know. If I have that equation y is equal to 35x, this was same format as when we had y is equal to mx. In this case, I can tell the m could be easily found by just looking at this equation. This 35 will be representing the slope. The bear, on the other hand, you need to find it by looking at 2 coordinates. The first point looks like is at 1,30. The second one is at 2,60. If I want to find a direct variation, the m is used as y over x. If you remember the previous lesson, it also can be found as rise over run. Since we are looking at the graph, I need to know how far am I rising over how far I'm running. It looks like I'm rising 30, as you see on the number, and running 1. So rise is 30, run is 1. In this case, if I simplify this, I'll get 30. So comparing these 2 numbers, which animal is faster? The answer is rabbit is faster. And you will need to explain why. In this case, as I'm seeing, 35 is higher number than 30. So while rabbit is traveling 35 miles in an hour, bear only travels 30 miles per hour. And in real life, it does make sense to me that I always thought rabbit is faster. Part C. Damon's earnings for 4 weeks from a part-time job are shown in the table. Assume that his earnings varies directly with the number of hours worked. So I still want to find how much he's earning per hour in this case, and in order to know which one is representing X and Y, I need to look at the sentence where it's saying something varies directly with. So in this case, they're saying that his earnings varies directly with the number of hours he worked. If you remember, the Y varies directly with X, where in Y, in this case, is represented by his earnings, so the money in here. And then if the Y is representing the money, the other one obviously has to be the time. And this M can be found as Y over X. You can pick any ratio that you'd like. In this case, let me just pick the first points. I had Y, the money is $112.50 over 15. If I simplify this, 112.5 divided by 15, I'll get 7.5, which will give you $7.50 per hour as your ratio. Number 4. A 3-year-old dog is often considered to be 21 in human years. Assume that the equivalent age in human years Y varies directly with its age as a dog X. Write and solve a direct variation equation to find the human year age of a dog that is 6 years old. So the first one is that you need to write direct variation equation. The second one is to solve to find the human year's age of a dog that is 6 years old. So let's look at the first information that's given to you. The first information is if there is a 3-year-old dog that is equal to 21 years in human, 21 in human years. If I want to find a direct variation, that is Y equals mx form. This m can be found as when you were looking at the numbers Y over X, where in this case, I need to again find which one is representing the Y, which one is representing the X. If I'm looking at the sentence, assume that the equivalent age in human years. The human years varies directly with the age as a dog, or X. So in this case, I'm going to write human age on the numerator over the dog age on the denominator. So let's plug in some numbers. In this case, if human years were 21, then the dog will be 3 years old. If I want to simplify this, 21 over 3 will become 7. Any 1-year-old dog will be equal to 7 in human years. So then it becomes Y equals 7x, and that's the first part of my answer. So if I want to know a human year's age of dog that is 6 years old, the dog was using the X value, so this becomes 6. I want to know what would happen to the Y value. If I'm looking at these two operations right here, then I don't see anything, so I can assume there's a multiplication. So 7 times 6 becomes Y equals 42, and that's going to be human year age. So that's also another part of the answer. One last problem that we are looking at is a charter bus travels 210 miles in 3.5 hours. Assume the distance traveled is directly proportional to the time traveled. Write and solve a direct variation equation to find how far the bus will travel in 6 hours. So again, I will need to 1. Write the direct variation equation. Then 2. I need to know how far this bus is traveling for 6 hours. That's going to be my second part. So let's figure out which one is going to be your Y and which one is going to be your X value. In this case, I'm looking at it as, instead of them saying varies directly with, they change the word slightly and saying something is directly proportional to something else. Then I can assume that the first part that they're saying the distance traveled will be your y value and the time will be your x value. So let's write the formula. The y is equal to mx is the equation that I want to write, where in order to find this m value, I need to use y over x. So in here, the y is representing the distance traveled over the x is representing the time. And with the first pairs that you already know, the distance was 210 miles, where it was driving 3.5 hours. If you simplify this by dividing 210 divided by 3.5, I will get 60. So 60 miles per hour, that's going to be my m value. So let me write this one more time. Y is equal to 60x, and that's the first part of my answer. Now they're asking you, how far will it travel for 6 hours? Again, when I'm talking about the hours, that's the unit of the time. So that can be represented by x. If I want to know how far, that's the miles that they're talking about. So I'm going to write that as y. So I want to know how far is this bus traveling when it's driving 6 hours. So similarly, what you've done in the previous problem, you're going to multiply these two numbers where the x is representing the 6. So 60 times 6, I'll get y is equal to 360, and this is representing the miles that it traveled for 6 hours. So this becomes my second part of the answer. This is the end of the lesson. Thanks for learning with me. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment.